Hello lovely people and welcome again to Curated Logic. Today we are doing our very first game review. If you haven't guessed already, the game we will be reviewing is Trivial Pursuit Live. Currently there are versions on PS4, the Xbox, but today we'll be playing Trivial Pursuit Live on the Nintendo Switch. So without further ado, let's get going. After picking your game length and choosing one of a limited number of average avatars, your game begins. Just like most games like this, you start with a quick run through of the players, and there is a short piece explaining the rules of the game. For those who haven't played before, the aim of Trivial Pursuit is to answer questions correctly in order to secure 6 wedges, one for each of the 6 categories: sports and leisure, science and nature, entertainment, geography, history, and arts and literature. In this version, you get points for every question you answer correctly, and as you reach score milestones, you get a new wedge in the colour of the last question you answered correctly. You do this over 3 or 5 rounds until someone gets 6 wedges. Just so we can have a real test of the game, I chose 5 rounds. In my game, the first round was called Quick Starter. A typical introductory game in so many trivia games, in Quick Starter you answered multiple choice questions. Each question was answered by all players, with only the players who answered the question correctly receiving points. Because all players answer each question, this round brought to my attention a potential issue I was going to have with the game. One problem I have had with trivia games over the years is the fact that many computers will answer some questions ridiculously. In this question, the answer is literally in the question. And although I could imagine potentially one computer making a silly error, 2 people getting this wrong really struck me as a bit frustrating. However, the biggest issue with this game came with the last question. Wanting to be nice to the player coming last, the game gives this player a choice of 2 categories for the final question, in the hope of increasing their chance of getting this question right. The problem arises when the choice between 2 categories is not a choice at all. In this case, the player got to choose between science and nature or science and nature. This ended up happening a number of times during the game, and let me tell you, when it's your turn to have to choose between 2 of the same category, which just so happens to be the category you hate, it really starts to annoy you. But then again, the whole premise of the game is to be able to answer at least 1 question from each category, right? Well, not exactly, but more on that later. Round 2 was called Grab Bag. In this round, you had 16 possible answers to a question, half of which were correct, the other half being incorrect. Each player took turns at answering, with a player being knocked out if they chose incorrectly. The round continued until all players had been knocked out or until all 8 answers had been chosen correctly. I personally really enjoyed this round and found no real issues with it. The computer players played sensibly and the questions themselves were really interesting. In round 3, however, some issues re-arose. In this round, players took turns choosing question categories between a choice of 2. If they answered the question correctly from the category they chose, the player got double points. However, 4 out of 8 times a category was to be chosen, the 2 categories to choose from were exactly the same, which really irritated me, even though the categories I had to choose from I actually really liked. Still, I wanted a choice. I wanted to know that the game wasn't going to make this mistake again and again. And the at times ridiculously dumb computer reared its ugly head again when a player chose Japan as the native home of koalas. Now, I am not suggesting that everyone need know everything about my birthplace and home. However, if you know who discovered penicillin, my guess would be you should know where koalas are from. So in the end, round 3 was a bit of a bust. Its point of difference was giving the players the choice to choose the category the next question came from. But when that choice is not a choice at all, it really is just a repeat of the multiple choice round of round 1. Thankfully, round 4 was better. The round 4 game was called Close Call Blitz. This round is basically a ranking round. Players try to pick the best of 5 answers to a question, with it being first in, best dressed. The higher your choice up the ranking of answers, the more points you get. The anxiety that came with having to be fast and the real quality of questions made this round overall very enjoyable. Throughout the game thus far, as players hit certain score milestones, they have been rewarded with a coloured wedge. That all changes now in round 5. In order to bring the game to a close, the final round is all about giving away wedges. A new category is chosen. The players are then presented with a series of questions, each with the same 2 answers to choose from. A player is knocked out if they get a wrong answer, and the last person standing wins. From there, a new category is chosen. This continues until one player has 6 wedges. However, this is where my major sticking point with this game is. As a lover of Trivial Pursuit ever since I was a little kid, I have always enjoyed the fact that you need to have knowledge that spans across all 6 categories in order to win. However, in this game, you can get away with not knowing certain categories. This is because at the end of the game, to win, you only need 6 wedges. You do not need 1 wedge of each colour. So, although I won, I ended up with 2 arts and literature wedges and, surprisingly, 2 sports and leisure wedges. To me, this not only takes away from the premise of the game, but also detracts from the satisfaction of winning. Not to mention, it is just not as aesthetically pleasing when you don't have 1 wedge of each colour in your pie. So in the end, I did enjoy the game, but there were enough niggling little problems that made me question whether I should purchase the game outright or not. Not only were there the problems with category selection and the dumbness sometimes of the computer, but also the type of rounds you could play. I can't be certain because I only played the game twice, but when the computer was choosing which game to play for each round, there only seemed to be a choice of 6 different types. This to me is not enough. For a trivia game, you want to come back to it and it be different every time. Although I love trivia, quite often with trivia games, they rely too heavily on the love of the trivia for the game to work. In order to make it something people will come back and play again and again, the game needs to provide something different each time you interact with it. The 2 times I played, I had the exact same progression of rounds and games each time. Although this is not terrible, it just didn't excite me to play again, especially when 2 of the rounds were basically the same because of the issue with the choice of categories. So at the end of the day, I would give this game a 6.5 out of 10. The trivia was interesting and I learnt some things whilst playing, but the fact that the game seemed pretty same each time you played it, and the other little issues I have discussed really made for a lower score. Thank you so much for listening to Created Logic's first review. If there's a particular game you want us to review, let us know in the comments below and we will really try to get to it. We'll be back in a couple of days with a new video. Until then, keep your brain active and have fun.